Hi, everyone. Welcome to What Just Happened. Today we have Juan Hernandez Campos. Juan is COO of Happy Returns, a UPS company. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you, Christine. Happy to be here.
So I want to get right into returns, the numbers that we now see. Now, there was an improvement from 2024 to 2025.
That's right.
So we went down slightly, but it doubled from 2020 to 2025. So maybe we're balancing out, but still we're at astronomical numbers, $850 billion
That's right.
in return.
That's an entire economy that retailers are having to manage. And it's emerged and certainly accelerated by the pandemic. But yes, it is astronomical and it's big. And we see that as a structural change in the market, but one that I think is part of commerce and e-commerce in general.
I had to pause when I said billion. I've researched this and I know this to be true. We've been talking about this. But when the B of billion is coming out of your mouth, it is truly like a GDP.
It is massive. And if you think about the way that you get to the 850 billion, you have to think on what base are you really talking about? And part of where that number is coming from is as a percent of total sales. And so where this 850 billion is representing, at least in the last couple of years, anywhere between 16 to 18% of total sales being returned. And so when you're a retailer looking at your business, this is no longer an issue that you can just not think about. It is a challenge you have to manage as part of your business and your operations.
Yet it still doesn't have a line item on the P&L. We've heard about chief returns officers and talk of that, but it's actually not an individual line item. It's in an operating kind of bucket. And so it's measured, but it's not really spotlighted, maybe in a way that it could be, whereas maybe Wall Street would punish a retailer if they were reporting and it was listed out as returns. I don't know. Maybe that's a way to affect change.
While you're right, we're not seeing a chief returns officer. It's certainly been, at least in the customers we engage with, it's been certainly a priority for the chief operating officers and chief supply chain officers that we engage with. We are seeing more people that are director of returns or vice president of things that indicate that the organization is beginning to reflect a shift in strategy where you're taking a problem that maybe you weren't thinking about very much and you're recognizing, gee, I have to manage it. I have to be proactive. I have to think about how to have a solution here. So we're beginning to see that shift. The scope of it in and of itself may not warrant a C-suite, so to speak, but organizationally, we're seeing some shift.
Okay, fair enough. We're here today to talk about your role, Happy Returns' role in making it more efficient for retailers and certainly more convenient for customers. You have two clients to serve, so to speak, both the brands and the retailers and also the customers.
That's right. Echoing the words of our co-founder and CEO, David Sobey, we really put the customer experience of the shopper front and center here with creating a frictionless experience at the point of drop-off, creating a return. And the other equally important aspect is not just making returns beautiful for the shopper, but making returns beautiful for the retailer when they're getting the returns in a consolidated fashion, in an easy to process way. This is easier for your 3PLs, for your processing facilities to go through all of that.
Maybe you guys are part of the problem. You've made it so easy and great for people that, hey, I can just ship it back.
At the end of the day, we have to take a look back at the industry and what the shopper is expecting. And if you abstract from that and you say, most people shop on Amazon.com, most people have grown to, in the United States, easy experience of delivery, very quick delivery. And there's an expectation that free returns and easy returns are part of that product that you're buying when you're making a purchase. To the extent that e-commerce brands or brands that are not just e-commerce, but want to grow their e-commerce, have had to compete with that level of value and offering. That's created a market for folks like Happy Returns to be able to step in and fill the gap. Now, I think to your point, there is a point where you say, hey, are we being too lax with our return policies? How do we tighten that? I think that's part of this question on policy, merchandising, how do you reduce that? Certainly, our job here is to at least take part of the problem which we believe is costly and difficult to manage, and make that easier for retailers. So I think it's a fair question, Christine.
Thank you. We're seeing some retailers charge for returns. What are you seeing?
We're seeing more retailers wanting to do two things, either charge for the return or potentially request a delay in when you refund because they want to get the items back. But yeah, we're seeing more and more retailers wanting to charge for the returns or at least evaluate their policy to maybe it's no longer a 90-day window, maybe it's a 30-day window, and reduce the scope. We've seen a number of our retailers do that in recent years.
I know you're starting to use AI to detect fraud in the returns at the location of drop-off, which is a place with humans manning it, very rushed, a lot happening, and also maybe not a full awareness of what an authentic leather bag from that brand may look like versus maybe another. So let's talk about what that is.
Yeah. So the Happy Returns model has been, as you're referencing, is box-free in-person returns. And what we think about at Happy Returns, the first layer of protection is that in-person interaction. We're actually scanning a tag or comparing the item being dropped off to an image that's part of the catalog. But you're right to point out that and something that we've observed is that if you're trying to pass a cheap little black dress for an expensive little black dress, a person at one of our partners, and keep in mind, we have hundreds of brands with thousands of SKUs. Being able to scale that level of precision is difficult. The use of our AI goes to tackle that problem, which is what we refer to as decoy returns, an item meant to pass for a more expensive one. And we do two things. The second layer of defense is every single return is now being scored. We give it a score for the sake of explaining it, low, medium, high. Over a certain score, we'll flag it in our warehouses. We'll actually pull that item aside. We'll open the items and then use AI a second time. This time we're taking a picture and we're asking the human and the AI to make a recommendation on whether the right item is being returned. And we're doing that for two reasons. As you outlined, sometimes you're going through the process and humans don't really detect nuances in the pattern of the fabric, of the placement of the buttons, the type of zipper it is, whereas we can hone an AI tool to be able to do that in addition to a human had taken a look. And so here is like humans and AI working side by side to verify the outcome of an audit and to feed back to the system and say, are we flagging the right type of thing? Are these the behaviors that we want to make sure maybe we add a bit more friction when behavior is steering off a path we don't like. And so when you think about the ecosystem that we're trying to build is still first line of defense, and where most fraud is stopped is still the return bar, in-person drop-off verification. But we have to have a couple of other tools in the toolkit to be able to address individuals that are trying to get through the process. And that's something that we've kicked off in November with a small pilot, and now we've rolled it out at scale with the rest of our retailers. And it's part of our roadmap. And you'll see more of this investment from Happy Returns because we do think it's important for us to stay ahead of individuals that are using AI to try to cause and create fraud. It's almost like the tool can work in both directions. It can help and it can hurt. And so I think as businesses, you have to think about how you deploy those resources to your advantage.
So I want to get some color in the behind the scenes on how that came about. Here's what I would have guessed happened is retailers started communicating with you that they were getting returns that were fake. They were the brick in the box for the iPhone or whatever. Not that, because it's
I gotcha.
Physical drop off, but whatever the bad actors are up to, whatever's trending. So did Happy Returns get feedback that there was a lot of fraud happening and then sat down and came up with a solution? And then when you sat down to come up with the solution, were you like, okay, I guess we should use AI, and should we buy it? Should we build it? I want to know behind the scenes how we got to this, because I think it's very innovative.
We ourselves certainly had customers flag these issues to us, but then we've had to, in the background, in our warehouses, we do pay a lot of attention to doing full-scale audits. It's dedicated capacity that we have. And through that, we said the decoy thing is something that we got to attack. Now, you could do that without AI. I'll acknowledge that one of the things that you could do today is without slapping the AI label on it, you could say, gee, I'm going to set up these business rules and flag these returns, and I'm going to audit them. And I'm going to go through the process of opening and inspecting the same way our 3PL would do at the point of restocking. That's business that you used to be in before we certainly can do that. But the issue was in scaling the solution. And this is where AI is really helpful, because you need a system that quickly is able to capture the image, look at the insights, and actually safeguard what you're doing. At the same time, in June, July of 2025, Happy Returns is making investments in our developers to get them access to the best AI tools to improve their productivity. And as part of that, we said, gee, why don't we use this in a specific audit in the warehouse to do that? So to summarize all of these, is a lot of things just fell into place. We were hungry to deploy AI for the many developer benefit of productivity that people are doing that. But at the same time, we recognized it will be a really cool thing to develop a process where we use and deploy AI to do things that allows us to scale more quickly, and something that Happy Returns is uniquely positioned to do, because relative to other service providers, and hopefully it doesn't come across as me pitching anything, we're actually the only player in the market that actually receives this in a warehouse and have the ability to open the bag and inspect, because we own the entire data flow. And so this is a capability where it's just, we're not just flagging a thing, we're actually doing something about it earlier in the process to make a determination on the refund before the retailer has to get the money, before the retailer has to be able to provide the risk, the financial risk. And we do that earlier in the process, ensuring a better customer experience whenever we get something wrong. And so that's the idea here. We saw a couple of issues in our own operations around decoy returns. Customers were flagging this to us. And maybe this is the part that you won't find surprising. I don't think there's the level of awareness that you would imagine on fraud. And people understand fraud is a problem, but being able to segment the problem into what's driving it, that's much more difficult for retailers to do. And one, Happy Returns just is better positioned to do that, since we have viewpoint into multiple retailers. It's part of our natural process of investment in what we call the return bar drop-off experience. At the end of the day, we do think, as a technology company, we do think two things really well. We know how to run drop-off and return bars really well, and we are really good at getting these things back to retailers very quickly. So how do we use those capabilities to add more value? It's a little bit how this was born.
How do you know what to keep your eye out for as a service to your customers? Because if you return fraudulent things, it reflects on you. So right. Is that something that you actually think about and do and sneak into like different conversations to hear what the bad guys are up to next?
Yeah, maybe we start by saying we had fierce debate internally on whether we would even talk about this capability, period. Because you invite, or maybe the virtue of talking about it may make people that otherwise weren't thinking about that as an option. There's a predicament you put yourself into, because you're right. We do very much think about, if you're talking about an $850 billion market, right? And if you're a fraudster, you're a bad actor, there's a price to be gained there if you identify the right channels. I do think that we do see ourselves as a fraud specialist. We do see ourselves as a company that needs to innovate in the space to remain relevant and to protect our customers. That is something that internally, in our technology roadmap, fraud. Is it something that, luckily for Happy Returns, we are keeping that, we believe, and have data to support that we are ahead of the market in that. But to your point, Christine, the issue is here, you never know what the next bit of thing will come up. And part of that is actually, part of what we're asking ourselves is, what are the systems and structures and people we need to put in place in addition to be able to do that? And I'll give you a little bit more insight to lift the hood here. One of our leaders within Happy Returns, Laura Perdomo, she's been with the company now for over 4 years. And she, through her curiosity and push for the company, has pushed us into this. And it's been in her leadership to build a team focused on fraud and shrink as part of a broader, and it takes deliberate effort, because you have a problem that's big and retailers don't understand very much, because maybe they've outsourced the work to a 3PL and then the data systems don't make it quite back. And so we've made some investments ourselves to just get smarter. We're also contemplating partnerships with 3PLs to better understand the overall ecosystem of what happens when people look at returns that we didn't process. So this overall ecosystem is important for us to invest in. We very much see ourselves playing in that space. And you're going to see more of us talking about that. Why? Because relative to other industries, like a financial sector where the tools against fraud are far more mature and robust. Again, $850 billion in our mind requires a level of discipline that we just haven't demonstrated in retail, and we need to. And it's not just in returns that there's fraud in, also in transactions. It also you got to bring those capabilities and think about, how do I mature this industry to align with others?
There are a lot of return specialists and companies out there. Why? It's such a hard business. I don't understand. Let me pick the hardest business in all of the hardest, one of the hardest legs of the retail journey, reverse logistics. Regular logistics is hard. Now I'm going to do the same thing in reverse. Oh my God, it's like impossible.
We think that, to your point about the difficulty of reverse logistics, music to my ears. Yes, this is exactly the issue, and why so many are attracted to this, because there's a problem to solve. It's difficult to solve. Intelligent, curious people get attracted to those types of problems. But who's going to win? I obviously I'm a player in this industry, but I think you win not by having the lowest cost or the best tech here. It is who owns the journey, who can collect the most meaningful data to create value. And for us, we've been solving this single problem for the last 10 years, going on 11. I do think that a question that we have to ourselves is, how else can we expand this capability? Another aspect that we're exploring is in my own personal experience, my shopping habits are changing too. Where I go look for information for products, is it going to be through agentic capabilities or not? If we want to be plugged in, and we are evaluating the ability for us to meet shoppers where they are when they're trying to transact. And so we're asking ourselves, today we follow very much an direct integration to a website model where people generate a return and QR code. Where does that need to evolve to? Does that need to be integrated through some kind of AI, Gen AI bot or capability that we plug into? Some of these things are maybe just natural consequences of where e-commerce moves. But we, again, in the ethos of being a tech company, we have to stay ahead of that. We have to allocate tech and discovery resources against that. We continue to invest in automation and in technology within our warehouses, because what that allows us to do is we're dedicating more and more of our resources in what I call like non-revenue generating activities necessarily, because and by that, most of our labor used to go to primarily processing and getting returns out the door. But now we're deliberately investing resources in taking things out of the standard process and looking at them. And so we're getting people to we're focusing our resources less on, let's move this item out of the warehouse, but more, let's inspect the quality of our work. Let's see what else we need to be doing. And so that's been a shift, even as we all experience cost pressures in the industry.
Well, Juan, thank you for your time and sharing with us some of the up and coming business services that we're going to be seeing in the space from Happy Returns, where the priorities are, where the investments are, and this crazy innovation. And I know you mentioned it was debated whether or not to really discuss how AI is verifying for fraud. The truth is, it proves how innovative Happy Returns is. So I thank you. I thank you for your time.
No, I appreciate the time to be here. We love talking about this stuff. Even though this AI thing was a bit of a debate internally, we do think ultimately it's important for us to take a position that we're not going to be reactive, we're going to be proactive, and that we're going to invest the resources, valuable resources, especially in tight environments, to be able to make that progress. So that's the commitment, at least. And this is why we talk about ourselves as a technology company.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Christine.
That is what just happened. I'm Christine Russo.